right. Hi, everybody. We are back with another Orca Month webinar as part of this series from WDC, Whale and Dolphin Conservation. And this is the second week of Orca Month. We hope that you have been joining us for some of these really great events and the daily actions that we've been posting both through WDC and through Orca Salmon Alliance. And all of these suggestions and great resources for activities that you can take at home that help southern resident orcas and salmon and watersheds. So we've got actions going every day. We have some pretty fun weekly events happening, and then lots more virtual events and actions and activities through our partners at Orca Salmon Alliance. So check out our website, whales.org, our Facebook page, our events, and then orcamonth.com for more information and lots of stuff that you can do to celebrate Orca Action Month and learn about southern resident orcas and share the hashtag Orca Love, which is our theme for Orca Month 2020. So today for this Friday afternoon, kind of part of our happy hour series, but kind of a standalone talk to we're gonna visit my conversation with Dr. Giles, who is one of our favorite orca researchers and definitely a person that we go to a lot to talk science and orcas, and chat with her and with Eba, who is the orca poop sniffing dog for Conservation Canines. But I will go ahead and show that conversation and we'll do all the introductions and everything in that. So here is my conversation with Giles and Eba. Hold on, guys. I am going to redo this because Zoom has a special way of doing a screen share. And I did not do it right the first time. And I want to make sure that you can hear our audio and that you can't hear me and the dogs barking in my neighborhood in the background. So take two. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Colleen Wheeler, the Jessica Ricos Fellow for Whale and Dolphin Conservation. And I am so happy to be joined today by one of our favorite whale researchers and our favorite poop sniffing whale poop sniffing dog, Eba. Hi, guys.
Hi. Thank you for having us. Eba's got a little interest in some other smells going on, so she might not hang out for very long.
She's got a working nose.
Yeah. Oh, she's just going to sit down here.
She's going to snuggle.
Yeah.
Okay, Giles, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about all the different, I never know how to introduce you because there's so many different things that you do in the southern resident orca world. So
thank you. Yeah. So my primary role working with killer whales is for the Center for Conservation Biology, which is a program at the University of Washington. And within that Center for Conservation Biology, which does a lot of things with endangered species around the world, from elephants to pangolins, wolves, whales. I work with the Conservation Canines program, which is a program that takes shelter dogs and puts them to work saving endangered species. So we can talk more about that a little bit later. I'm also the science and research director for a nonprofit called Wild Orca. And through that organization, I do what I call translational science. Yeah, you've got a nice shirt on from us, Save the Salish Sea. And Wild Orca is actively involved in fundraising for research. Primarily, we're focusing on trying to raise funds for the Whale Scout project that Eba and I work on, but also some other programs if funding can come in. We'd like to help distribute to other things that we're passionate about. And then I also am a visiting lecturer at the, I guess I'm called a resident scientist at the University of Washington's Friday Harbor Labs here on San Juan Island. And I'm a lecturer in the spring quarter typically for a class that I was able to make up a couple years ago called Marine Mammals of the Salish Sea. And I've taught marine bio through just basic marine bio through the labs as well. And then just kind of my extra work, I do volunteer work with the Orca Salmon Alliance. I'm one of the science advisors for the Orca Salmon Alliance and a science advisor for Killer Whale Tales, which is a program for kids, educating kids about about the whales, but more about the health of the natural world and what individuals can do to help that. And then also one of the founding people of the San Juan Island Naturalist Program and the Salish Sea Ecosystem Advocates.
That is a long and impressive list. And you can add to that too, longtime friend of WDC and our kind of unofficial science advisor. Because if I have an orca science question, you're usually the first person that I check in with to say, like, hey, let's talk this out, and can you help me understand this better, or what do you think about this science or this new paper? So you've been a great help and advisor to us over the years too, and we're huge fans of the Conservation Canines project over here. We're a dog-friendly office, and we all dogs are part of our staff here essentially. So we love that program and all the different pieces it brings together.
Well, and I think it's important to give a shout out to Whale and Dolphin Conservation. Were able to provide funding for us last year, which was so helpful. It came at a time in between grants when we didn't have funding, and so that funding really helped me to be able to spend some time doing grant acquisition, grant analysis, looking for other funding to come in, as well as some field work. So that was very much needed and very much appreciated. So thank you, WDC, for that.
You are more than welcome. We're very proud to help support this really important research and help learn more about the southern resident orcas. So it's a great partnership, and we love the program. So anything we can do to help. And you did also join us for a CK9 Orca Month talk a couple years ago. So you're a repeat Orca Month expert. And that talk was amazing and had so much good information and stories. And I'm definitely bummed we didn't record that one, because that would have been so good to revisit and reshare and hear again about some of the really cool work that you've been up to. But we do want to talk about Conservation Canines a little bit more today. So you touched on that as part of the various work that you do for southern resident orcas. So can you tell us a little bit more about that specific program?
Yeah, so the Conservation Canines program was started by Sam Wasser, probably, going on close to 20 years ago. He started with this idea of using scent dogs to essentially sniff out endangered species that were in a situation where you didn't want to stress out the animals. Using a dog allows us to do non-invasive fecal collection, whether that be on endangered elk or caribou, because you can go into an area on land after the animals have exited the area for the season and pick up samples, for example, under many feet of snow. And so grabbing those samples allows a tremendous amount of information to be examined just from one sample. So yeah, as I said, it was the brainchild of Sam Wasser, Dr. Sam Wasser. He's the endowed chair of the Center for Conservation Biology at UW. And since he started the program, they have worked all over the world doing, in Belize, in South America, in many different islands, in Hawaii, St. Lucia Island, picking up things as odd as arboreal iguana sheds, like skin sheds and eggs, snake sheds, bat guano, looking at PCBs right now. Interestingly, dogs have been trained to find PCBs, and there's an ongoing project on the Duwamish River in West Seattle, which is it used to be a very important salmon river. And it's very, very polluted because of all of the industry that occurs there. So conservation canines are on the job, even sniffing out PCBs. And one of the really nice things about the program is that we focus on finding dogs that often have been relinquished to shelters because they don't start out making very good companion animals. These dogs tend to be very high energy, play motivated, so much so that they kind of can wear their family out if the family doesn't know exactly what's going on and that dog needs a job. And so those are the dogs that we want, that would almost rather play ball than eat. And then because ultimately once we get them and we can show them and give them a job, show them that they've got something to do, they become a lot calmer and end up making just tremendous companion animals and teammates on research teams.
That is one of my many favorite things about the Conservation Canine program, is that it does rely mostly on shelter pets and rescue animals, and giving dogs that might be too much for a family pet a job and something to do, and keeps them occupied and healthy and making these great contributions to research. So yeah. All of the different programs that CK9 is part of, like sniffing out elephants, and we talked about that at the beginning, and pangolins and snake sheds and all of this stuff. That's all land-based, so it changes a little bit when you're on the water and the dog can't, sniff out and take you to the sample. So how do you find whale poop from a boat?
So most of the dogs that we've used, Eva, our current dog, who's asleep on my lap right now, I'll talk more about her unique story in a little bit, I think. Most of our dogs have come from the Conservation Canines program. So when I say our dogs, I mean the Whale Scout Project, have come from the mainland Conservation Canines kennel, and they've been trained on anywhere from 2 to 20 other species. They've been on jobs, they've done terrestrial work, and then for whatever reason, we end up getting them up here. Our most famous dog, and the first dog that we really pioneered this research with here on the West Coast, was Tucker. And he was a lab mix, probably pit bull lab and then something else mix, found on the streets of Seattle. Definitely had high ball play drive. And he came to us after about, 12 or 15 species that he was trained to find. Mainly the difference is that when you're working with a dog on land, the dog gets to move to the sample using wind as the tool to get to the sample on their own accord. They get to move their feet and run there or walk there on their own. The marine work is very different because the driver and the handler as a team with the dog are together work to make sure that the boat gets taken to the sample. So in essence, the driver ends up being the legs of the dog, and the handler is the interpreter between the dog and the driver. Being able to, say, for example, see over the front of the boat for a dog that tends to, all the dogs are different in how they notify us that they're on a sample. But for Tucker, his tell was very clear. He would, once he was on a sample, he would be almost leaning over the front of the boat with his nose. So me as the driver in back, I couldn't see what was happening with his nose. And that's why it was really this great 3-partner team where Liz or Colette or whoever was handling Tucker could look at his nose and tell where his nose was pointing. The way that we train the dogs is that we train them on land using an older whale scat sample that we got in a previous year. And we train them exactly like you would train up just a dog finding terrestrial species, or a dog finding even a cadaver or drugs or something like that. The idea is that you're pairing that smell with their reward, which in this case with our dogs is always playtime. And so the way that you do that is you start off just letting them smell that smell that you're trying to train them on and immediately giving them the toy. Like they don't have to do anything for that first part of the training. They just smell the smell and get the toy and get to play.
Good association of, the smell means, the association of like, this smell means good stuff for me.
Yeah, exactly. And so then it's just a series of moving that sample farther and farther away from the dog, and then ultimately letting them off the leash and letting them go and use their own, natural smelling ability and the wind to find those samples. With the whale work, we have one more step, and that is to take that sample and put it in a bowl, and then we put the bowl on the water, and then we drive away from it. And we start off at closer distances, like maybe 200 meters or maybe 300 meters away from the bowl. And we'll operate the boat, drive away from the sample, and then pull the dog out of the crate, and then tell him, like, let's go find it. And then they'll go to work. They know what they're supposed to do. When they're on the bow, somehow they just know, okay, well, this is my time. And then we drive the boat downwind of that sample so that the wind is picking up that smell and carrying it across the sample and ultimately carrying it to the boat. And then when the dog smells that smell for the first time, just as they're coming into what we call the scent cone, like if this is the poop back here where I am, and the wind is coming from like over my head and carrying that smell towards the computer, the scent cone, if it's a nice kind of medium-sized wind, the scent cone's going to be wide. If it's a really strong wind, the scent cone's going to be very narrow. So we always try and train them in perfect conditions. Not a lot of chop on the water, about a 7 to 8 knot wind. And then we're looking for, as the boat is moving perpendicular to the wind's coming like this and we're coming across it. As we come into that scent cone, the dog will have a change of behavior and move towards the strongest part of that scent cone. And that's when we know to turn the boat into the wind. And then it does tend to be, because the water's moving, with the current, and even just like wind across the surface of the water can move the sample, or move the bowl in this case. So the dog is always making these minute adjustments back and forth, and that's what we're following. And once we get, kind of that routine down, and we retrain every year, it's an amazing system. And our dogs have found samples, in one case, 45 minutes after the whales had exited a pass called active pass. The poop ended up getting entrained in this little eddy, and it just stayed there, just kind of in this gentle whirlpool. And we were going, just through, and Tucker had this crazy behavior, and the whales were nowhere near. We had no idea where we were going to get a sample, but we trusted him, and sure enough, we got a really amazing sample.
I've been lucky enough to join you on the boat on a handful of occasions, and just watching that partnership and relationship between dog, the handler, and the driver is so amazing, because it is these, as you mentioned, these very sometimes subtle and sometimes crazy Tucker reactions, changes in what the dog is doing that tells the handler, okay, they're paying attention to over here, and then signaling to the boat driver which direction to go. And it's really cool to watch as an observer and just see, how that works. And then, also, I'm a dog person, but picking up on those really subtle cues, you just have to know your dog so well. Yeah. Know what their signals are for, what they're smelling, what they're onto. So it's really cool to see in person. I think, we'll try to get a video or something posted too. But you mentioned that Eva took a little bit of a different path to being a conservation canine than Tucker or than some of the other dogs in the program. She started out as still a rescue dog, but she started as your dog, as part of your family. And then you started thinking she might be a good CK9 dog. So what about Eva made you think she could be really useful and really a good part of this program?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't me. In 2008, So this was just a couple months after I had gotten her. I got her in September. I adopted her from my sister, who found her wandering the streets of Sacramento after she had been placed in a foster home and then gotten out of that foster home's yard. My sister found her as a 5-month-old puppy and adopted her, and then had her for 2 years or so. And then my husband and I adopted her in September of 2017. And going into the field season of 2018, I was here with Colette and our other dog, Dio, who was working with us in 2018 on the SCAP project, Whale SCAP project, as well as the lead trainer at the time for the Conservation Canines program, Heath Smith. And he's actually the one that asked me if I had ever considered training Eva. And I think it was because she was absolutely insistent in pushing her toy, her tug toy, into Heath's hand to try and get him to play with her. And honestly, it never really had crossed my mind for some reason, even though by that time I had been working with Conservation Canines and the Whale SCAP project since, 2009. So 10 years or so I had been on the project. And when he said that, I said, no, actually, I hadn't thought of training her. Do you think she has what it takes? And he said, do you want me to try? Do you want me to test her like I would any other dog? And I was like, yeah. And so he took that tug toy and kind of rubbed it all over his body and his armpits and in his hair. And I'm just like, okay. And then he chucked it into like waist high grass. And before I even knew what was happening, Eva was just like on the ground and then up in the air and into the grass without even a second thought. And he just looked at me. He's like, yeah, she's got what it takes. And so I was like, wow, okay. Well, then honestly, it went out of my head again because our field season was just starting. We had a great season with Colette and Dio. And then, we just assumed that was going to be the same team, myself and Colette and Dio, going into 2019. And then all kinds of crazy, scheduling happened, and some lack of funding on our part to get to that we didn't know for sure that we were going to be able to get out on the water, or when, I guess I should say, in 2019. And Colette and Dio ended up going on to a different project. And then when funding came through in June, we were like, oh my gosh, we don't have a team. We don't have a dog and handler team. And that's when I, said to Sam, hey, what about me trying to train Eva? And he's like, okay, but I don't want you to get your hopes up, because sometimes when people are trying to turn their own personal companion animals, pets, into working dogs, it's heartbreaking for everybody because sometimes they just don't have what it takes. And I was like, okay, I'll prepare myself. But it turns out she was phenomenal at it. She started training in June 24th last year. And we got a couple of good weeks, 2 weeks or so, with our professional handlers and trainers, Tammy and Julie from Conservation Canines, came up and worked with me and Eva. And then we got out on the water July 5th for the first day. We did find some samples using a different technique called focal follows, where we're staying, 2 or 3, maybe 200 meters behind the whales, and basically checking the fluke print that the whales leave when they go on a dive. And we did find 3 samples that day on the 5th last year. And then again, every time we found one, we'd show it to Eva, let her play, even though she didn't find it herself. We were trying to match that smell, that wild whale smell, just to kind of solidify what she was learning on land. Mm-hmm. And then the next day on the 6th, she found her first sample all by herself.
She picked it up really quickly. Yeah. So that first really, kind of like on the job training, and this is what it's like on the boat, and this is what, what kind of changes with land, and then the next step is doing it on our own.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And we forgot to say, but she's now also a Disney princess because she was featured on a working dog program.
She is Disney's newest princess. Yeah. Pretty princess, actually.
And she's living the good life now, taking a nap.
Yeah, she's actually snoring. I don't know if you can hear that.
I can't, but I can picture it. So she's been doing pretty good so far at the CK job. She picked it up pretty quickly. But last year was kind of a weird year for the Southern residents. They were really not in that traditional summer area around the Sandwich Islands, where that's where most of your field work happens, is during those summer months and in that area, which probably made it kind of difficult for both of you with having a very strange field season. So can you tell us a little bit more about how weird last year was and why you think the orcas weren't around?
Yeah, so last year was, I guess I'd call it the worst of all the years so far that these whales have been studied since the mid 70s. We had, so traditionally by mid or even early, but certainly by mid-May or late May, J-pod would be here in the inland waters being seen quite often. And by June, we'd get numbers of Ks or all of Ks and Ls back into the inland waters. Sometimes Ks would take as long as the early part of July to come in, but certainly by June, we would have been seeing, decent numbers of the whales from the Southern resident community. Last year in May, we only had 2 days in which we had Southern residents in the inland waters. June last year was the first time on record where there were no whales, no Southern residents documented in their summer core critical habitat. That was shocking. And then in July, they were only here for those 2 days, July 5th and 6th. And that's shocking because in the past, they would have been here in July. All members of the Southern resident killer whale community could have been expected to be here in and around these waters in the month of July, but we only had 2 days with them, July 5th and 6th, and we didn't come back until August 15th, which was a shockingly long time for all members to be gone. And September ramped out a little bit better, where we had them at least in the inland waters, although interestingly, they spent a fair amount of time down in the South Sound, down near Seattle in September. And so everything is changing with these whales. And what's driving that is the fact that the fish that they would have been coming here, the different runs starting in early May, are just not here or so diminished that there's just not enough fish to bring the whales into their summer core critical habitat here. They were just spotted yesterday off of Tofino, which is on the west side of Vancouver Island, out the Strait of Juan de Fuca. J-pod was seen out there, and they're spending more and more time out there, kind of between the west side, southwest side of Vancouver Island, out to Swiftsure Bank, which is a shallow bank out the Strait of Juan de Fuca, 20 miles or so out the mouth of the Strait of Juan de Fuca off of Nia Bay. And they're spending time out there because that's where the salmon are staging. Salmon stage out there in that more shallow area before they either head into the Strait of Juan de Fuca or continue on south down to the Columbia. And so the whales are going where the food is. L-pod was darn near non-existent to us here in the inland waters last year. K-pod was only seen a handful of times, really honestly, same with J-pod. And so the change is being driven by the lack of quality and quantity salmon that would have been here in the past in the summer months. One thing I do want to state, because I think this gets confusing for some people, is that, we Washingtonians, and especially we San Juan Islanders or Salish Sea people here, like to claim the whales for our own. But the fact of the matter is that they were only here, even in the best of years in the past, half the year. The rest of the year, they were plying the waters between the northern part of Vancouver Island all the way down to California, Monterey, Northern California, or about the middle of California. And so these whales, this particular population of southern resident fish-eating killer whales are as much Oregon's whales and as much Northern California's whales as they are Washington whales, because they spend, again, only half the amount of time, and even less than that now, now that the fish that would have been coming back here to the Salish Sea are so diminished. The whales are spending less and less time in Washington waters, or at least inland Washington waters, compared to waters along the Pacific coast. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that this is both a wonderful thing that Oregon can claim these whales just as much as Washington can, and Northern California can claim them just as much. That it's also a really bad thing, because it's good because we all love these whales, and the more people that have a deep connection with them, the more people will want to do something to help them. But it also means that we need to act. It's a bigger army of people that are coming together, understanding that it's up to all of us to try and recover this population, because they don't belong to any one region.
Giles, you're certainly preaching to the choir with that one, because as you know, I'm down in Oregon, and my constant refrain is that they're Oregon's orcas too, and trying to raise awareness and get information about them down here where I live in kind of the middle part of their range, and getting Oregonians to understand that we are connected to these whales as well, and we have a responsibility to step up our efforts for their recovery, and that actions in our state impact them as well. And we've talked about a lot before, and kind of are constantly on this, of the need for action throughout their range, because if we focus all of our efforts in the Salish Sea, it's a very important part of their area, but as you said, they're only spending half their time there. So it kind of has to be this big region-wide or even nationwide effort to get the attention and the resources needed throughout the extent of their range, to give them everything that they need throughout their home.
Right. And really, honestly, to that end, we need to be including BC Canada, because they're, again, these inland waters, Canada has designated critical habitat in the inland waters here, and along the outside of the west side of Vancouver Island. Because the whales are there. Honestly, the whales were in the Canadian waters more last year than they were in U.S. waters during the summertime. And so it's really an international group of us that are working together. And there's amazing groups in Canada that are raising awareness in Canada as well for the Southern residents. And it's wonderful too with Orca Month. There's Orca Month Canada, International Orca Month, groups that are coming together and doing events this month in June, and beyond year round, to raise awareness about the plight of the Southern residents. So, and Washington wants to claim them, but they're not just Washington whales by any stretch.
Yeah, that's true. And we have part of the whole idea behind Orca Month is sharing the story of the orcas and its transition from Orca Awareness Month and just getting people to understand this population to Orca Action Month. And so getting people to both understand them, but then also follow that up with taking action to help them. And that it's been a region-wide effort with Canada involved, and with Washington and Oregon, and hopefully Northern California soon too. And this year, since it does look a little bit different, we're going virtual for Orca Month. Hopefully that extends even farther, and we get people from all over the place speaking up and helping to pitch in to help recover these orcas.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should say that too, because just before we came on, a friend, a colleague actually with Wild Orca, Allie Barrett, texted me from England, and she's like, "Oh my God, whales are being seen at Limekiln, grab Eva and go." It turned out it was a false alarm, but there are people around the world that are in love with these whales, tapped into their plight, and doing whatever they can from wherever they are on the planet to try and raise awareness about these whales, and doing things even in their own neighborhood that aren't directly impacting the Southern residents. But we talk about ecosystems. You and I have talked a lot about ecosystems and why it's important to be thinking at that broader scale. Mm-hmm. If we take even one step farther and, look at the Earth, planet Earth as an ecosystem, no matter where you are on the planet, if you're doing things to better the environment, you're ultimately helping the Southern residents and ultimately helping us as well.
And salmon too, because salmon in the Northwest, a lot of different issues there. So, they leave their home rivers and they go way out to sea in the Pacific Ocean. So things that impact the marine ecosystem and the ocean ecosystem as a whole impact salmon, which is their food and one of the biggest issues that they face. But speaking of planetary ecosystems, at WDC, we like to talk about how important whale poop is to the planet in general. And whale poop is really important for your research too, but for kind of a different reason. So can you tell us why your work does focus on collecting these particular samples and tell us about Southern residents?
Absolutely. So feces is it's like a gold mine. That's how we describe it. A good big sample of poop from any species is like a gold mine of information. It can be queried for anything from parasites, bacteria, fungus, microplastics, analysis for telling the health of the gut biome of an animal, no matter what kind of animal it is, a whale or a wolf, elephant, whatever. What we look at with the killer whale feces, we started out looking at Dr. Wasser, Sam Wasser's first grad student was Catherine Ayers, who got her PhD looking at stress hormones and nutrition hormones in the feces. And she was, her paper came out in 2012. And what she was trying to see is whether or not there was a way to tease out whether or not boats were stressing out whales at different, to different degrees based on whether or not they were getting enough to eat or not. And so looking at stress hormones, nutrition hormones, now we know that we can look at pregnancy hormones. A paper that came out in 2017 looking at pregnancy hormones in these fecal samples showed that 69% of these females that are getting pregnant, of the samples that we got, 69% of those females were spontaneously miscarrying their pregnancies before the baby was born viable. And those females that were miscarrying were females that were nutritionally deprived. That's a pretty significant number. When you're trying to recover a population, we only have 72 individuals right now. Every pregnancy counts. And so to lose almost 70% of female pregnancies is a tremendous hit, not just to the population, but to the individual moms who are getting pregnant and losing their babies. These whales are incredibly socially bonded to their animal, to their offspring. And that starts before birth. The babies, we know from human studies, babies can perceive mom's voice. They can hear or perceive sound, other sound, like sounds of pod mates, for example, in the case of whales. We guess that that's the case because it's certainly the case with human babies. These moms give birth to babies and they are instantly bonded. The whole family is instantly bonded. And when these babies die right after birth, or even before, they've ever taken a breath, they get miscarried before they're fully formed. It has to take an emotional toll as well as a physical toll on the mother and the entire family and population. What else can we tell from poop? Our lab, Sam's lab, does analysis on toxicants. So looking at PCBs, which were an industrial lubricant that were highly, highly dangerous to mammals, to any living thing, really. And his graduate student, Jessica Lundeen, did some fabulous research on looking at PCBs in southern resident killer whale feces. Other toxicants like DDT, which was also a banned chemical that was used in agriculture, banned in this country in 1972 or 73. It's still very prevalent in the population, in the environment. It's in the environment, so therefore it's being uptaken through the food web and ends up in the blubber of whales. I mentioned parasites, bacteria, just pretty much anything you can imagine. We can obviously tell who the whale was, the DNA of the whale that pooped out the sample, as well as things like what species of fish were they eating. They were eating Chinook salmon, but not just Chinook salmon, but say Chinook salmon from the Fraser River, or the North Fork of the Thompson River, which is a tributary of the Fraser River. So again, really, I can't speak highly enough about poop, and the more of it, the better. We have a slogan. We sold out early. I'm trying to get my buddy Michael from Wild Orca to design me a new sticker. But I want to do this sticker. Nobody cheat and take this idea. But it's going to be, everybody loves a pooping whale. That's what our sticker said. And we, got rid of hundreds of them, and we're out now. So we need a new one. But really, when you think about that, it's such a perfect slogan, because if you have a pooping whale, it means you have a whale that's alive and is eating. And so, who doesn't love a pooping whale? So, yeah, I'm a big fan of poop.
We are too. We love pooping whales for a number of reasons. And I think what you just said is possibly the number one reason. A pooping whale is alive and eating and healthy enough to be pooping. So,
right.
Yeah, it's all good things. And some of the, the stuff that you're looking at from these samples in the poop collected, that's the top 3 issues for Southern residents right there. You're looking at nutritional stress, and what they're eating and what they're not eating, and when are they not pooping, and when are the samples not good, and what could that indicate, and how is that impacting pregnancies and other issues, and the toxicants and contaminants, and what's present in their system, and how is that playing into things, and stress levels, like what's going on that could be stressing them out, and exacerbating kind of some of these other issues. And yeah, it's amazing how much information you can get from a sample of poop.
Yeah. And using the dogs, the Conservation Canines dogs, we can collect it non-invasively. So we're not stressing the whales out ourselves in order to go and get that sample.
Yeah, you're not chasing them down and following with a little baggie right after them. You're keeping your distance, and the dogs help to sniff it out, which is, again, another reason why we're such big fans of the CK9 program, and why it's just such an incredible combination of all these different elements coming together. So as we're talking, it's May. We're recording this early because we're hoping that in June for Orca Month, you are out on the water, hopefully getting some of those samples with Eva. So we have not had a ton of Southern resident sightings in the Salish Sea yet this year. What are your hopes for this upcoming field season?
Well, first and foremost, I'm hoping that the whales are somewhere getting food. Secondly, I hope that the fish are going to come back to the rivers here that will bring the whales in. And then I'm hoping to be on the water absolutely every day with the Southern residents, every day that they're out here, kind of moving through the population. Ideally, I would be able to get a number of different samples from different matrilines, different family groups, spread throughout all 3 pods to be able to get some nice comparison analysis between the 3 pods, because they don't occupy the same territory during the wintertime. And so it's possible that maybe J pod's getting more food than Ks or Ls, or maybe Ls are getting more food than Js and Ks. And so that's important for management decisions with regard to fisheries management, fisheries quotas, when, where, and how people can be or should be fishing in order to minimize the potential for taking essentially needed nutrients from the whales.
Yeah, and something that we've talked about with you in terms of the when, where are they eating and what are they eating with K and L pods specifically, because they're spending winter in a different place than maybe J pod. Some of those early season samples that you're collecting when they first come back into the Salish Sea, it's really high in fat, and so they seem like they've been eating some really nutritious, really good source of food initially, and that kind of points to the importance of coastal foraging areas to the months, which can be kind of hard for the whales. So
yeah. Those early spring returns to the Columbia, mostly, and some other rivers down as far as, Northern California. Those spring returning Chinook salmon have historically, probably always will be the fattiest, the most lipid-rich fish of the year. And so that the whales have access to ample numbers of spring are incredibly important, because like you say, the winter months are hard. Generally, water's choppy, or it's harder to hear and see food if you're an echolocating marine mammal. And so food is important for these whales year round. I do think that it's worth saying, because this is a fun fact that maybe gets lost sometimes, and that is that killer whales are mammals like we are. They have to eat every day in order to maintain optimal health. They're not mammals like gray whales or humpback whales that go on long migrations and fasting periods for months of every year. These whales do not fast purposely. The southern resident, killer whales in general do not fast on, if they can help it. They want to be eating and need to be eating every day like we do in order to maintain individual optimal health, but also have an opportunity to increase the population by pregnancies not being lost. And so it's really important for us as concerned citizens, as scientists, as fisheries managers to recognize that the whales need food throughout the entire season, throughout their entire range. And so that's something that WDC, through your help, Colleen, attending so many different meetings in person and online, other groups in the Salish Sea like my own and others that have gone to these meetings and participated. It's incredibly important for people to participate when possible in these discussions and give public comment when comment is allowed. To ask managers, tell them that you care about the recovery of the southern residents, and ask for their support and their care and concern for recovering the fish that the whales are reliant on. Because ultimately, if there's enough fish to be having an increased population of southern residents, it means that there's more fish for humans too, and more fish for the fish sake, for the fish genetic sake.
Yeah, more fish for the fish sake, and more fish, especially more salmon, is a sign of a good Pacific Northwest ecosystem in general. Because salmon, we could do a whole other webinar on.
Let's do it.
They go out in the ocean and get big and fat, and then go back into rivers and help to bring nutrients back into river ecosystems. And salmon, for their own right, are really important. We like them because they are good orca food, but. Yeah, but salmon and healthy ecosystems in general are very, very important things to be involved in and be aware of. And that's a big part of what Orca Month is about. And as we've talked about before with WDC, some of our previous webinars is talking about these action opportunities and how everyone can get involved in both individual actions and in speaking up for more policy and management changes that help support the southern resident orcas and what they need to survive and to thrive. And there's Eba, she's waking up from her nap. So on that policy side of things, fingers crossed for a good field season and good samples. What do you hope to see for the recovery side for the next year for southern resident orcas?
Well, I'd love to see some females pregnant and giving birth to healthy babies. We need to have that. We need to have the females getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and giving birth to healthy babies, and enough food that those babies grow up and can have babies of their own. So I'd like to see some successful pregnancies.
Yeah,
that'd be the best measure that something is going right, that they're getting enough food, is females getting pregnant and staying pregnant long enough for the baby to be born healthy.
Well, fingers crossed for some good poop samples and some new calves this year when they come back into the Salish Sea or when they're spotted. And thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Giles, for being our orca expert as always, today and every day. And thanks, Eva, for waking up just in time to say goodbye to everybody. Hi, Eva. She's still
Oh my,
sleepy.
it's sleeping.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And we will see you on the next Orca Action Month event. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We had a great conversation with Giles, as you could tell, and Eva, who, has a lot of work to do as a conservation canine and a Disney princess. So she took a very well-deserved nap while Giles and I are talking. And I always love talking to Giles. It's always great to hear from her. She's a fantastic researcher. She's an orca expert, and she's a great advocate for the whales and for salmon and healthy ecosystems as well. And of course, we always love talking about whale poop. As Giles said, everyone loves a pooping whale, especially, we love to have those discussions. And we can talk about, when I check in with Giles, we talk about everything from whale poop to Eva, to salmon and the social connections of orcas, and talking about how they're bonded, and everything, that happened a couple summers ago with J35 Tahlequah as an example of just how important calves are to this population, and how they're, how they're bonded and connected to each other, and how important those family ties are in the population. So as of today, we are about halfway through Orca Month, and the orcas do have yet to come back into the Salish Sea, into those summer foraging areas. So no news or updates on what they're up to, but fingers crossed that hopefully they will come back into the area pretty soon, and that there's some good news for some healthy new calves. So we will obviously keep you all updated as we learn what's going on. And then for the rest of Orca Month coming up, lots of events. Check out orcamonth.com. There is a Monday webinar series happening with Orca Network, and they will be talking about noise and disturbance on Monday. And then if you want to hear more from Giles, she's going to be one of the guests on the salmon webinar on June 22nd, so the Monday after that, and joining some other researchers to talk about how important salmon are and what exactly is going on with the lack of salmon and how that's impacting the whales. So check that out. More details on orcamonth.com. You can find out more events that we are doing. WDC, you can join us for weekly Whalecraft Wednesdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we will be doing another Orca Month Happy Hour series next Friday at 4 p.m/7 p.m. And then we'll have Orca Trivia and a watch party for the last week of Orca Month to wrap everything up. And you can find all of that on our website at whales.org. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today and watching our conversation with Giles. Don't forget to take pictures if you're doing all of our actions, and tag us and use the hashtags. And we will see you virtually. Okay, thanks, everybody. Happy Orca Month.